In my last Artstudio video, I went over a bunch of new features that were added in version 3.1 of the app. And in that video, I talked briefly about one of the new additions to Artstudio, which is the ability to customize your top menu bar. And I figured today we'd go a little more in depth into that because I don't think I really touched on how useful this update is. And I figured the best way to do that would be to go through some of the tools that I'm using on my top menu bar for quick workflow and easy access, so you guys can get a good example of what I use on a daily basis to create my artwork. All right, so let's get into it. So I have 14 of the 20 possible options on top of my menu bar. So that means I could add 6 more buttons onto my top menu bar, and I might do that someday, but right now I feel like I have my menu bar pretty set and ready to go, and there's not really much else that I really desire to have on there at the moment. I might add a couple things here and there, but I really feel like I got it pretty solid right now. So let's go over these 14 things that I've got. So the first 4 items on this toolbar are pretty standard, and they usually come default on the app, and this isn't a very big deal. It's kind of what every art app comes with. But I really wanted to point out the importance of how easy the access is for this toolbar. So the first button we got is the paint button, which I'm sure you guessed is what you paint with or what you draw with. The paint button is placed first because I feel like that is probably the most important out of any of the options you could have. It's easy to click, it's easy to see, it's just, you know, it's the first, it's the most important button on this toolbar, and you know, you're not gonna be creating a whole lot of artwork without your paint tool. So that goes for number 1, and really the paint tool goes without explaining, but I made sure to keep it first just to keep it in the easiest access point possible. And for number 2, wet paint is right next to paint, which I feel is just a logical successor to the regular paint tool. The wet paint tool has a lot of awesome features such as realistic watercolor brushes and awesome oil paints, and I'll put a few examples up of these brushes being used because it's just great. They smudge really well and they blend really well. So that's why that gets the number 2 spot. It's really useful in that spot. It's the logical next step: paint, wet paint. And I feel like that almost explains itself. And then right on to number 3, this is the eraser. And I'm sure once again, this kind of explains itself a little bit, but if you're painting, you're gonna wanna possibly undo or erase some of the mistakes or anything you may have done that you might wanna get rid of, even if it's just for a stylistic thing. If you're trying to, like, you know, chisel out a shape or something out of some paint that you laid down, the eraser is in the 3rd easiest access point, so you know right where it is, you can click it and it's ready to go. So I put the eraser in the number 3 spot. And then right after the eraser is our lasso. And our lasso is for when you're trying to like select any objects and really move them around or select different things and transform it. Or if you want to select an area of a layer and not affect the rest of it, you can use your lasso tool, select the area, do whatever you gotta do, and then just, you know, deselect and you're ready to go. So the number 4 spot goes to the lasso tool. We're moving through these kind of fast, but I feel like anybody who's familiar with art apps up to this point, you're pretty much aware of what these tools are and their importance. So I'm just kind of moving through these pretty fast until I get to my, my custom buttons, and those are where it gets really interesting, and that's where you really unlock the full potential of this app. So let's just go through these really fast. I'll give a brief explanation of each tool and until we get to our custom ones, okay? So the magic wand selects things in a little bit more of an AI way than the lasso tool does. Instead of manually going through everything and trying to, you know, manually get any sort of objects out of your frame or any objects in your selection, the magic wand, you click once and it selects an area that it automatically detects as an area that's active within a certain set of parameters. So the magic wand is really useful, especially if you're doing something like line art or anything that involves like solid color or cell shading, because that's when the magic wand really shines, because you can select a bunch of simple colors and chunks of things and just affect those with a very, very fast workflow. And speaking of fast workflow, let's move on to the next object, which is our rectangle selection brush, which is, I've noticed that the rectangle selection brush is one that I use way more than like the circular selection brush, which is surprising to me. I guess in my brain, it's like, if I need straight edges, I'll use the rectangle selection, but if I need anything with a more organic shape, I just tend to use the lasso tool. I don't use the elliptical selection tool a whole lot, just because I feel like the lasso is kind of a good in-between of like a rigid tool and a squared off tool. So the squared off tool, which is the rectangle selection, is in one end of the spectrum, and the lasso is on the complete other end. So I don't really leave the circle tool in there, just because I don't feel like I personally need it in my work. You might in yours, and you have the freedom to add that, but me personally, I don't really see the need for it. But the rectangle selection is super useful. You can, you select rectangles, and you can affect certain areas made of rectangles. You can get really designy with some stuff, select a rectangle, fill in something, select another rectangle, fill in something else, or affect just that rectangle area. It's a great tool, and it definitely belongs on this toolbar. Next comes the crop, and the cropping tool is actually one of the items that I use generally last in any art that I'm making. I do all my painting, and then I just crop stuff in a little bit just to make sure that, everything in the composition is nice and even, or if there's any like missing edges on the side of a painting, there's some like brush strokes or something, I can just like close that in, or draw attention or affect the composition just a little bit, just to influence the way you're looking at the piece. Or if I need to size something up for Instagram or anything like that, the crop tool really comes in handy. So quick access is maybe not the most necessary thing, because you could go into the menus, but I'm not a person who likes to click through the menus a whole lot just to do something over and over. So having it up on the toolbar is super useful. And then after the crop comes our bucket fill. And if anybody has used even anything like Microsoft Paint or any art apps, Microsoft Paint and up, you know what the bucket fill is. You select an area, or you let it auto detect an area, much like the magic wand tool does. You drop your paint in and it fills an entire area. Makes your workflow super fast, and it can have great results, or it can have, not so great results, just depending on what your workflow is, or maybe how you're handling a certain part of your piece. But it is a very useful tool, and that is why it deserves its place on our toolbar up here. And right after the bucket fill comes our gradient tool, which is much like the paint bucket, except the gradient fill can be used when you select something. It can be used just to cover the entire canvas. And unlike the paint bucket tool, it actually, like it says in the name, has a gradient to it. You can select a multitude of colors to make an entire spectrum, so you don't have to do that manually with something like a soft brush. So that definitely deserves its place on this menu as well. And after the gradient fill comes our text. And I don't use the text tool a whole lot, but it is way easier than going into the menus and putting a text box in there through the menu functions. I highly recommend keeping the text box up here, just because it's easier than clicking 2 or 3 times just to get to it to add one piece of text. When you add text, especially when you're on something like the iPad, you're so used to clicking something once and having text just pop up, having your keyboard pop up, and having it good to go. And when you use an app where you have to click several times just to get to a text tool, it kind of ruins the immersive experience of the iPad, and also the experience of creating art. Me personally, I'm one of those people who can really get brought out of the zone very easily. So if I have to do something like click 5 or 6 buttons just to get to one item, and it's frustrating and you can't find it and where is it, it gets kind of annoying, and you get out of that zone really fast where you're like just focusing on creating. So any buttons you can place up on the top of this menu that really just gets you more immersed into the creative experience, I highly recommend just adding that. If you want anything to be just one click away at all times, no matter how often you use it, put it up on the top bar. You have 20 options. You have 20 slots to put something. Put anything you need. I highly doubt that you really need more than 20 actions or 20 tools up there. I think that should be enough. And so anything that keeps you in that immersive experience where you can just create and not have to worry about anything else is just, definitely do that. All right, and now we're on to the super interesting things, where the next 2 buttons are our custom buttons. And with the version update 3.1 of Artstudio, this is when we got introduced to custom buttons. And by custom buttons, I mean you can actually take any of the 100+ actions that exist inside of Artstudio and make them into a single click. Now, I haven't explored these options really to their fullest degree, but the options that I noticed I used the most, I placed onto 2 buttons on the top menu. And that first button is the mirror button. And if you're a digital artist, you've probably been told by tons of teachers and tons of your peers that when you're working on digital art, flip your canvas constantly. Flip your canvas constantly, because it gives you fresh eyes on your piece, and you can get a fresh look at what you're doing. Maybe there's a bit of proportion error, or maybe there's something that just doesn't quite feel right. And when you flip that canvas, you will notice right away the problems that are glaring out. So flipping your canvas often is a great tip for artists who are just starting out, or who have been in the industry for years, working on art for forever. It's a great tool. Getting fresh eyes is always necessary when you're working on something, because you almost get tunnel vision in a way, You almost get tunnel vision, like you're focusing on a piece for hours on end. You kind of get used to the way it looks, and then when you flip it, you're like, oh, whoa, I had no idea I had no idea how like skewed this image was or something. So definitely one of my most important tools is the mirror tool, and I feel like you would really like it as well. So the mirror tool does not come default as an option in the Artstudio toolbar menu, but you can add it. I even put a little arrow emoji so you know that it's like the flip tool. I don't know, I thought it was kind of nice. Because you can add not just text to label your buttons, you can also add emojis, which are super useful because you don't really have to focus on reading the text then. You can just click the emoji and you know what it does. And the same goes for our clear tool. And a lot of artists that I know don't tend to use this tool a whole lot. They tend to just like delete a layer or create a new one, or just manually erase an entire layer as they're going if they're drawing something and they're sketching it and they want to get rid of something. But me, once again, I really like to be immersed in that experience and do as many things quickly as I can. And the clear tool does that brilliantly. So literally all the clear tool is, it's exactly what it sounds like. If you're drawing something on a layer or doing sketches and you don't like the way they're looking, boom. The clear layer gets rid of it. And there are a couple of different ways you can do this. You can either set the clear layer in your quick menu, where you can do either a 3-finger swipe or a 4-finger tap. It brings up your quick menu. You can click clear that way. Same with any of these commands, but I'm really focusing on the top bar today. If you want a video on the quick menu, definitely hit me up in the comments and let me know that's something you'd like to see. But as for right now, we're talking about the top menu. The clear button is super useful just to clean your canvas off if there's anything you don't want on there. If you're going through quick sketches like I do every day to warm up, I don't need to keep any of those layers. I just finish my sketches and I click clear. I do it again and I click clear. And it's a great way to not only keep yourself immersed in the experience because you barely even have to think about clearing the layer, it also saves a lot of space on your iPad because you're not wasting RAM or any other resources by creating more layers or clicking more buttons than you need to. You're just clicking one button, it gets rid of your data, and you can keep on drawing. So I really like that feature a lot, and I added a little sparkle emoji. I added a little sparkle emoji to show that that was clear. That was the closest one I could think of, so don't judge me. But the clear tool is super useful. I would highly recommend putting it on your toolbar because it's a great way to speed up your workflow, especially if you're an avid sketcher like I am. And then for our last two tools, I use these pretty rarely, but they are useful in their own right when it comes to an easier workflow or just trying to not click through menus. So the move tool is a lot like the transform tool in Artstudio, except it doesn't affect anything except the placement of the object you're selecting. So let me give you an example. If you drew, let's just say you drew a dot on your canvas, right? And you wanted to move that but not affect the way it's shaped or the way it's formed or its size or anything like that. You click on the move tool and then you have immediate control to drag and move that object on whatever layer you're selected to anywhere you want on the canvas. You can even move it off the canvas. And the move tool is just an easy one-button way to just move something really quickly without as much finesse as something like the transform tool would take. So it's a really useful tool just to do something. Once again, the top toolbar is for speed and to keep yourself in the immersed experience of drawing. So this, to me, is a better button to have on the top tool menu than the transform tool, because when the transform tool opens, you get another menu dialog, whereas when you use the move tool, it's just the lone tool and you move your object and then you go to a different tool, which is the fastest way I've found to move something in Artstudio. And then once again, for our last tool, I put it at the end because it's probably the tool I use the absolute least when it comes to Artstudio, but it is useful when you do need it, the Smudge Tool. Now, earlier in the video when I talked about my wet paint tool, which is right next to the paint tool, the regular paint tool, those brushes kind of smudge on their own. So whenever I need to smudge something, I generally use just the wet paint tools. There are many, many wet paint tools when it comes to Artstudio, so definitely check them out. They come default. There's a bunch of wet paint brushes and watercolor brushes. But there are very rarely any times where I just need a smudge with like no color information or anything like that. But when those times do come, I'm glad that I have this on my top toolbar instead of hunting for it in the menus. So even if there's a tool that you think you might not use very often, if you think you're going to use it at all in the future and you think it's something that would take you out of the experience to find in the menus when you're working on a piece, definitely just slap it up there in the top menu. That you have 20 spaces, you're probably not going to fill them all up anyway, much like I haven't. Like I said, I only filled 14. So even if it's a tool you're 50-50 on putting up there, what do you have to lose? You have a bunch of spaces, you have a bunch of options. Just put it up there and put it dead last. So that way it's up there for easy access, but you don't necessarily have to be looking at it all the time, or it doesn't need to be something that you can accidentally click on. Putting it at the end is just a good way of keeping it out of the way, but also easily accessible. So once again, I don't use the smudge tool all that much, but when I need it, it's there. And that's really the beautiful part about this toolbar. And given the fact that we can customize so many options about our toolbar now, I would highly recommend exploring these menus and exploring all of your options when it comes to this toolbar, because you can really get a lot out of it, probably more than I've even gotten, but really just explore and try to set up everything in a way where you can have the immersed experience and just draw without having to click any menus, and you can just work, and it's just so nice to just be able to work. I don't necessarily want to call it stress-free, because I mean, art is inherently stressful from time to time, but it's a really good way of getting your tools out of the way. Artstudio with their updates are making it easier and easier to just draw and just create without any of the tools getting in the way. And that's really the beauty of a program like this, designed for a mobile interface. It is a fantastic tool that just lets you create. And what more can you ask for as an artist, right? So this has been me talking about the top menu toolbar and the things that I keep in it and the things that I find the most useful. If you have any tool recommendations for the top toolbar, by the way, definitely let me know, because I'm always looking to customize my interface and do something new. So definitely hit me up in the comments and suggest some awesome tools to put up in the top panel if you have Artstudio version 3.1. So now that I've talked about the tools that I have in my top menu in Artstudio, let me show you how to create a custom button for yourself in your top tool menu. So here we are in Artstudio, and I'll show you a couple different ways to create a top menu custom button. Now when I say there's two ways, first way is to use one of the default buttons that Artstudio comes with, which is, you know, something like the crop tool or the magic wand tool. Those tools already exist inside of Artstudio's interface to go on the top menu. But when it comes to something like the mirror tool or the clear tool, those do not exist in Artstudio as already pre-existing buttons, and you have to set that as a custom button. So all you have to do to open up the dialog to create a new brush for the top menu is go to these three dots on the end of the bar here. Click that, and as you can see, there's this big square menu that shows you all the potential options that exist for the buttons in this top menu here. So what don't I have? I don't have the polygonal lasso, and I think the polygonal lasso would be a pretty good thing to have on the top menu, okay? So click these three dots right here, right next to the X, click that. Okay, and as you can see, it's opened up this huge dialog like this, right? And you know, there's a few things up here, and everything that has this little picture next to it, are the default items that I just showed you in the last menu. And anything that has the green plus sign next to it are things you do not have in your menu yet. Okay? And I said the polygonal lasso was the thing I wanted to add next. So the polygonal lasso is the second item on this list. All you gotta do is click the little plus sign, boom. And there you go. As you can see here and here, the polygonal lasso is available in your top menu now, and it was just that easy. So that's option number one for adding a new tool to your top menu. That's definitely the easiest one, but the second way is pretty easy as well, but this is definitely the easiest way. It's all set up for you, ready to go. Click your tool and just click done, and you're ready to go. It's up there, and you can select whatever you like. And now for option number two, when it comes to our top tool selection, this is going to be a custom button. A custom button. So a custom button could be anything from flipping your canvas to clearing a canvas, or any of the many menu options that exist in Artstudio. So let's just go through and pick one ourselves, and I'm just doing this on the fly, but because I don't really have any desires to add something new to my top menu, but this is just for the example, okay? So we're gonna click our three buttons again at the end of the top menu, right? And we're gonna click these three dots next to the X. And now we have all of these options. All of these options. I believe there's over 200 of them, which is absolutely insane. So definitely take your time going through these so you know what you might want or what you might want to avoid even. Maybe there are a few items that you definitely don't want to click on, okay? As you can see, there are many, many options here, and I'm trying to find one that seems like it'd be interesting to have on a top menu to use for for something like this. So I've gone through the menu a little bit just to pick something that seems interesting to add to the top menu, right? Something that would be useful in any given circumstance. So I think I'm going to use the reset rotation button. The reset rotation button, that seems like something, if you rotate it in a weird way and you just want to click one button to go back to where you were, this seems like something that'd be pretty useful. So we're gonna add this just how we were adding, just in the same way that we were adding the last item in the previous step. You click the green button, and as you can see, there's this big RES up here. RES, and it's just text, right? It's just text, and that's kind of, we don't want that, right? It looks like, you know, hats off to Artstudio for giving us this option, but, you know, we want to add our own text, right? So click done, okay? And now you can see, you know, all these options up here. Click the 3 buttons again, and as you can see, when you go down to the RES, the reset rotation, you can click on it right here like this. Okay, and now this dialog comes up. This dialog is asking you what you want your custom name to be for the rotation. Or any of the options that have been given to you, right? Or any of the custom buttons have this option. Now I can delete this. I can name it anything I want. I can name it Kage, like that. Rename. And it only shows the first 3 letters up here, but it definitely gives you that option if you only care about spelling out your custom buttons with letters. But I tend to not really enjoy the way that it looks when there's letters. I think in the long run would confuse me, especially if I had a bunch of custom buttons up here, all with different letters. I feel like it would just look like a jumble of words, right? So the way that I'm going to handle this is, well, this is a rotation tool, so I'm gonna go into my options again, get rid of this, and go into my keyboard, right? But now I'm not just gonna spell anything. I'm going to go into my emojis, right? Into my emojis, and let's just see something that I've used before. I want to use something that's like a fun symbol that would mean rotation, right? There's a ton of symbols. There's a ton of symbols when it comes to the emojis, right? So you can pick almost anything to be a rotation tool, but I feel like we're getting somewhere close within these menus here. Okay, and you see this button right here? This one? That's our rotation button. Definitely our rotation button. So let's click on that. Boom. Click rename. Boom. And now this, it kind of looks like a square, just a blank square right here, but if we click done and look in our top menu right here, that is our rotation tool. And now let's try to rotate our canvas weird. Boom. Puts your rotation right back where it was. Let's try that one more time. Flipped it upside down, rotate, boom. Goes right back, right to where it was. So that's how you customize your top menu, and definitely get creative with these and set as many custom buttons as you want and just go crazy, and I think you'll have a ball with it. So definitely give it a shot for yourself, and I think this is a very useful tool, and I don't see this level of customization very often when it comes to these type of creative iPad apps. So definitely give this a go if you have Artstudio, and I can't recommend messing with this enough, and it's fun. You can make the app your own. You can make the app your own and let the creative process flow, so it's fantastic. And guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and if you have any suggestions or any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the section below. And definitely I'd love to hear about your top menu options. If you have any custom buttons that you like to set, I'd love to hear about them. Definitely hit me up in the comments and let me know what you're working with. I'd love to hear about your experience with Artstudio. And for those of you who haven't gotten enough of my content here, you can always check me out on twitch.tv/kagebonito, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Pacific time over on Twitch. And if you'd like to support this channel further, you can always visit our Patreon, where you can get monthly rewards such as stickers mailed right to your door, and exclusive posts and all sorts of stuff. So definitely hit me up over there as well. And if you like this video, definitely leave a like and subscribe. We're trying to get up to 800 subs, and that'd be really awesome if we could get to it by the end of the month. That'd be fantastic. And speaking of Patreon, I would like to thank my wonderful patrons over there already who have been supporting me and helping me out a ton to create content for this channel and the Twitch. And you guys are just amazing. Thank you so much. And that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you found it useful, and I will catch you guys next time. All right, peace.
I mean, really, I think it's pretty much good. I mean, I think we're pretty much good to go, right? I don't even see why I spent so much time on this art. What have I been doing with my life? I clearly could have been making superior stuff this whole time. Tab. This is absolutely ridiculous. If I was you, I would send that one instead. I think so. I should really watermark